Good afternoon. I'm Brownfield anchor reporter Meghan Grebner. We are gearing up for a week of fun and policy discussions as it relates to the cattle industry this coming week at National Cattlemen's Beef Association's annual meeting held in Houston. With us is Ethan Lane with NCBA. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I think it's going to be a pretty exciting week next week in Texas.
Hey, there's no better week of the year than the Cattle Industry Convention and Trade Show. No matter where NCBA hosts it, I guarantee you it is always 7,000 or 8,000 your closest friends coming together to talk about what we all love, the U.S. cattle industry.
Exactly, and beef as well. So let's start first, just for folks who aren't going to make it next week, what can they expect to hear as it relates to stories, outlooks, things that are going to be discussed next week with all of our close cattle friends?
Sure. We have a lot going on, here in Washington, D.C., but in the industry generally. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion, obviously, on cattle markets. That's always, over the last couple of years, been kind of a marquee issue for us, and this year will be no exception. But I think there's a lot of discussion about some of these other issues in the supply chain as well. I think labor is going to be a pretty big issue under discussion this week, with a lot of affiliates and producers coming to Houston wanting to have some of those conversations. What are we going to do about persistent labor shortfalls? What's the government doing? What's Biden's plan? How can we help with that? I think that some of those other supply chain issues, transportation, driver shortages, shipping container issues. I think there are a lot of different segments of the cattle and beef supply chain on the cattle producer side that are looking forward to coming to Houston, trying to find some paths forward for NCBA to engage there and move the needle. So we're looking forward to having those conversations. We're also going to continue to have a pretty robust climate and sustainability conversation. WOTUS is front and center yet again. I feel like, we could probably get a tattoo of it at this point because it's so sort of omnipresent in NCBA conventions. But, here we are with the third different rulemaking in 6 years in 3 different administrations on this topic. And we're once again asking our producers to make sure they make their voices heard as part of that process. So you're going to hear a lot about WOTUS as well. And also the cattle industry's exemplary record of sustainability and making sure that that's well understood both domestically and around the world.
I think it's really interesting. I've been doing a lot of series on carbon and carbon conversations, but the sustainability conversation within agriculture really has kind of taken an exponential shift. And I feel like we're driving it a little bit more, and we're helping folks understand a little bit about what cattle producers are doing, what the industry does. How does that set the stage for the 2023 Farm Bill, which I have to imagine is going to be in the back of everybody's minds as well, because that's coming down the pipeline,
Sure.
But as well as these climate smart agriculture practices that the administration is also pushing and touting?
Well, I think the tone shift that you're detecting, and you're right, I agree with you, is really one of switching from defense to offense. I think we spent so many years in this industry fearing that climate conversation. And what we've learned is, man, we've got a great story to tell. And we need to tell it more aggressively as we're, seeing people in Washington seeking to determine our fate and the rest of agriculture as part of some of these initiatives moving forward. So, looking for ways to make sure that we're given credit for what we're doing, that we're given opportunity to continue in a voluntary way, putting points on the board, adding new conservation tools, putting more conservation on the ground, sequestering more carbon in the soil, protecting more habitat for wildlife. All of the things that cattle producers do on a daily basis as part of managing, 600 million acres of pasture and rangeland in the United States. Those are things that a couple of years ago, I think we recoiled a little bit from. And now the industry is leaning forward, knowing that we really have a really strong argument to make. And we're hearing from the administration that they recognize our use as a tool rather than an impact, which is a huge shift in tone from the federal government from, say, the Obama administration.
Before I let you go, and I just wanted a couple of minutes to chat and preview things coming up this week, I think the elephant in the room, as you mentioned, the conversation that's always there aside from WOTUS is about cattle markets and market transparency. We saw an announcement from American Farm Bureau that kind of walked back support and asked for a revision to the Grassley-Fisher Compromise bill, specifically targeting that mandated cash number. As you look at that, does that possibly light a fire into these conversations again. It was a very, I want to say, not flamboyant conversation we had last summer when we met in Nashville.
Right.
But do you think maybe that kind of reinvigorates that conversation again about where producers and members want to move going forward?
Well, I mean, what the Farm Bureau AFBF has done here is really move their position to where the cattle industry's position has been throughout this discussion, right? NCBA's position has been that we like everything in the Fisher bill, but we don't have policy to support a mandate. Given the triggers program, the voluntary framework that we've undertaken over the last couple of years, the success of the feeder portion of that, dramatically increasing cash trade in the Southern Plains, and the shortfall of the packers in meeting the feeders on the playing field there and meeting their part of that voluntary framework. We're now going to need to determine as an association, our affiliates from around the country are going to need to determine how we move forward. Are we going to kind of continue to agree with where we've been and where Farm Bureau now is about the need for a lot of these solutions, but not a mandate? Or are our affiliates going to come to that meeting and decide that maybe it's time to relook at the mandate concept? That is going to really be the operative question, I think, in that live cattle marketing committee meeting. And what we've continued to talk about, what you and I have talked about multiple times, is as many affiliates as we have around the country, we have opinions and perspectives on this issue. The goal here is to find some common ground and a path forward that we can communicate to Capitol Hill and lawmakers that are trying to find some way to be helpful here.
Ethan, always great to see you. Any other thoughts before I let you go today?
I'm just glad that here in year 3 of the pandemic, we're actually having a convention. We're going to have, 6 or 7 or 8,000 of our closest friends in Houston, Texas. And anyone who wasn't planning on coming, I hope they hop in the pickup and head that direction, because we're live and in business. And this is going to be a fantastic opportunity to check in and see what's going on in the industry. And we're excited to get down there. I'm going to go home and pack right now, as a matter of fact.
Well, that's great. And I will see you on Monday, hopefully a little bit warmer weather than you and I are both experiencing right now.
That's right. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Ethan.
Thanks.
I'm Meghan Grebner for Brownfield.